What's up, fantasy managers? The first round of the playoffs is behind us, and it's time to look into Week 16 player pause. The New Orleans Saints have 7 players to choose from, and the information I will give you will help you decide who to start and who to sit from that team. I know you're interested, so stick around for 7 seconds. You can do it! Okay, and before we go into the information, I want to let you know that this has been recorded on December 12th. Which is a few days before the Thursday night game, so information might change, but I'm still going to go over this anyway. So the over and under is 46, which kind of caught me off guard, and I had to go back and make some changes to my player pause list. The New Orleans Saints are 22nd in the league, averaging 22 points per game and 26 points per game in the last 3 games. And the Saints are also 14th overall, averaging 334 yards a game. The Los Angeles Rams defense is 19th, giving up 22 points a game. They've allowed 25 points in the last 3 games, and the Rams allow 336 yards a game from their opponents. Heading into Week 16, Pro Football Network has the Saints offense line ranked 25th. Their line has been inconsistent all year, but the Saints are 8th overall and sacks allowed, only giving up 2.1 sacks a game. The Los Angeles Rams defensive line gets to the quarterback 2.1 times a game. That's tied for 24th in the league. And the Rams defense is 20th, allowing 5.3 yards per play. Now, with some key injuries I want to go over, wide receiver Chris Olave, ankle. He was limited practice today. Offensive tackle Ryan Ramczyk, his knee. He did not participate in practice today. And wide receiver Michael Thomas, not expected to return from the IR today. So now I will go over the players of who I will play or pause for the Thursday night game. And I'm starting this off with the Baco boy, Derek Carr, the quarterback for the Saints. He is my gamble of the week. Carr's record on Thursday night is 5-5. He's averaging just 216 yards and less than 1 touchdown, averaging 0.6 touchdowns on his Thursday night games. He is quarterback 18. Versus a defense that allows 18 points to quarterbacks. In the last 5 games, the Rams have allowed 10 passing touchdowns and 20 points to quarterbacks. The Rams are giving up a lot of fantasy points to quarterbacks, and they've had a lot of tough matchups this year. The quarterbacks the Rams have faced so far this season are Brock Purdy, Dak Prescott, Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, and rookie Anthony Richardson, who put up 29 points against the Rams with 56 rushing yards and 1 touchdown. 1 rushing touchdown. Last week, the Rams did well against Sam Howell, and Howell ended up being benched in the 3rd quarter, but Jacoby Brissett came on and he put up 15 points in his limited time. Carr on the road has not been great. He's had a few good games, but more bad games. He averages 12.5 fantasy points on the road. His average completed air yards is 5.4. That's like Kamara territory. And his attempted air yards are 8.1. That's the same as Josh Allen. Carr has thrown for 16 touchdowns, which is around the middle of the league. Rams play zone 82% of their defensive snaps, and Carr struggles against zone coverage, but this is a volume game for Derek Carr. He is 10th overall in red zone attempts. He has 26 attempts inside the 10-yard line and have converted on 10 passing touchdowns. He is a gamble because he is inconsistent. But this Rams secondary is not playing well, and there won't be a lot of rushing yards in this game from the Saints. Carr has thrown 300 yards multiple times this year, and I can see that happening again on 38 to 40 attempts this game. So I'm rolling the dice, and I'm playing Derek Carr. So now I want to discuss Alvin Kamara, the running back. This is a no-brainer, or is it? On Thursday night, he averages 49 rushing yards, 40 receiving yards, and 5 receptions, but has never scored on a Thursday night game. He sees 8+ men in the box 21% of his carries. It results in minus 83 rushing yards over expected and minus 0.53 rushing yards over expected per attempt. Not great for a running back, but he does his damage in the receiving game. Kamara is running back 9 versus a defense that allows 17 points to running backs. The Rams have only allowed 6 total touchdowns for running backs this season. In the last 5 games, they're giving up only 10 points to running backs. That is the worst matchup in the league for running backs. But during the last 5 games, the Rams have given up the 2nd most receptions to running backs with 27. Do you see where I'm going with this? Najee Harris, Aaron Jones, and Jerome Ford finished with 10+ points and had 3 to 5 receptions. Ford even had a reception touchdown. Kamara leads the NFL running backs in targets. He averages 7.1 targets a game. That's like wide receiver numbers, but he's not a wide receiver. He's a running back. Christian McCaffrey is running back 2 in targets, and he's averaging 4.9. Kamara leads all running backs with 68 receptions, and didn't he miss 3 games at the beginning of the year? Yeah, he did. That alone makes Kamara a play every week. But to add on to that, he is tied with Taysom Hill for the Saints with 7 carries inside the 5 and 3 touchdowns. The Saints run the ball 43% of the time, and he's the lead back. And the Saints throw 56% of their snaps, and Kamara is second on the team in targets. He's the most consistent running back in the league with a high floor. I definitely play Alvin Kamara. Now, the first wide receiver I want to talk about is Chris Olave. He is injured, but he's expected to play. He is wide receiver 23 versus a defense that allows 34 points to wide receivers. The Rams have given up 170 receptions to wide receivers and 11 touchdowns. Both stats are in the middle of the league. The Rams, the last 2 games, they've given up 15 plus points to Zay Flowers, Odell Beckham, Curtis Samuel, and Terry McLaurin. Rams are averaging 26 points to wide receivers in the last 5 games, and that is the 5th best matchup for wide receivers. Overall, the Rams secondary has been up and down this season. But if you can't run against that defense, you need to throw. Also, the Rams are scoring points, so opponents are trying to keep up. Olave's average separation is 3, and that's good. And his intended air yards is 14, which is great. With an average of yards after catch 4.3, he is close to averaging 3 points a catch in PPR format. Olave plays in the slot 40% of his routes, and he's targeted 26% of his routes, and earns an average of 0.41 fantasy points per route run. Rams cornerback Jacoby Durant covers the slot 82% of his snaps. He is targeted at 16% of his routes and allows a low of 0.24 fantasy points per route run. Olave plays the right side of the field 38% of his routes, and that's important to know because Rashid Shaheed runs most of his routes in the slot position as well. When Shaheed is in the slot, Olave will play on the right side. The Rams cornerback Darian Kendrick covers a right receiver 75% of his snaps. He is targeted at 15% when in coverage and allows 0.24 fantasy points per route run. Olave averages 51 snaps a game. That's 12 more than the next wide receiver for the Saints. The Saints throw 56% of their snaps played, which is the middle of the league, but he leads his team in target with 116. He averages 9 targets a game. He leads the Saints wide receivers inside the 5-yard line with 6 receptions and 3 touchdowns. He has 100 yards or a touchdown in the last 5 games, and it's possible he will have 100 yards and 1 touchdown against the Rams. I play Chris Olave. And the wide receiver 2 for the New Orleans Saints, Rashid Shaheed, wide receiver 46 versus a defense that allows 34 points to wide receivers. Rams giving up 170 receptions to wide receivers and 11 touchdowns. Both stats are in the middle of the league. Rams averaging 26 points to wide receivers in the last 5 games, and that's around 5th best for wide receiver matchups. Shaheed plays in the slot 47% of his snaps, and he averages 39 snaps a game. He gets targeted 18% of his snaps and has an average of 0.35 fantasy points per route run. His next most played position is on the right side of the field, only at 26% of his snaps. And like I said earlier, the Rams cornerback Darian Kendrick covers the right receiver 75% of his snaps. He is targeted at 15% when in coverage and allows 0.24 fantasy routes per route run. So Shaheed averages 4.5 targets a game, and it's been since week 8 since he's had a game over 5 points. He's a big play guy, but Carr's deep ball accuracy completion percentage is 18th in the league. So I pause Rashid Shaheed. And next up, and yes, you may not be aware of this, but there's a third wide receiver for the Saints, A.T. Perry. Perry averages 34 routes a game. He plays the left side of the field 49% of his routes, but is targeted an awful 8% of his runs, and averages a red 0.19 fantasy points per route run. The best cornerback matchup for the Saints is Ahkello Witherspoon, I guess that's his name, who covers the left side 74% of his snaps, and he is targeted 24% in coverage and allows 0.32 fantasy points per route run. That's the worst on the Rams. If Michael Thomas were back, this would be a play. Perry will likely score less points than Shaheed. You'll forget this player is even on the field. So I pause A.T. Perry. All right, and let's finish this player applause with my big brothers. There's 2 of them this time. Starting off with Juwan Johnson. He's tight end 36 versus a defense that allows 13 points to tight ends. It's like, what's up with this guy? We've seen tight end success with the Raiders when Derek Carr was over there, and most of us thought it would carry over to Juwan Johnson, but he only averages 3 targets and 2 receptions a game. With 2 touchdowns this season, he isn't a big option for the tight ends. I believe before last week, his last end zone target was in week 9. His volume sucks, but if Olave is out, he could see more end zone targets. If Olave plays, I pause. Juwan Johnson. And the other tight end, Taysom Hill, he's tight end 12 versus a defense that allows 13 points to tight ends. Only 4 games this year over 10 points. He has a few games with 10 plus rushing attempts. And in those games, he also had over 10 fantasy points. He is tied for number 1 on the team with 7 carries inside the 5 and second in targets inside the 5. But it's sad to see games like last week where he was 3rd in receptions, receiving yards, and targets for tight ends on the Saints. Foster Moreau had more receptions than him. He throws the ball once or twice a game. His rushing is used around the goal line, but this defense has only allowed 5 rushing touchdowns this year. So I pause. Taysom Hill. And now I would like to bring you into my final thoughts. Derek Carr, my gamble of the week. He has 5 300-yard games this year, but has issues now scoring touchdowns on the road. 6 touchdowns on the road compared to 10 touchdowns at home. This is my least confident pick because I don't trust Carr's consistency, but damn, quarterbacks have been lined up against the Rams secondary. Alvin Kamara, probably the best matchup proof running back after Christian McCaffrey. The rushing has not been great this year, but what he lacks, he also gains in receptions. He's the most targeted running back and has the most receptions. He is a guaranteed 10 points a game. Chris Olave, he's the number 1 wide receiver for the Saints, leads the team in targets, receptions, and yards, and his average attempted yards is 14. Plus, he has a great yards after catch. He has 100 yards or a touchdown in the last 5 games. Watch this player get his targets in the slot and get 100 yards and a touchdown in this game. Rashid Shaheed, the speedster on the team, but if Carr can't connect on the deep ball, Shaheed is no use for you because his volume isn't there. A.T. Perry, he's only a body on that field since Michael Thomas's injury, and he is less looked at than Rashid Shaheed, and his matchup against the Rams cornerback is the worst in the game. Juwan Johnson, he did score a touchdown last week with Olave out. That might mean something if Olave does not recover in time from this injury. Olave's end zone targets need to go somewhere, and it looks like it went to Johnson. And lastly, Taysom Hill, the guy who does it all. But he hasn't been doing it effectively in the last couple of weeks. His strength is in the run game, but the Rams are pretty damn good against the run. Don't play Hill and pray for a goal line touchdown. Not this week. Okay, zoners, that's it. We made it to the end. I do believe the information in this video will help you decide who to play, who to pause for your players from the New Orleans Saints on the Thursday night game. Tyler's got his video coming out tomorrow, and he's doing his player pause on the Los Angeles Rams. Check it out. They're pretty good. If you haven't already, if you could please drop a sub, press the like. It goes a long way. We appreciate all you zoners out there. We enjoy the feedback that we get. We want all of us to grow as a community. Make sure to check out our videos later this week, and I'll talk to you then. Deuces.